Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Lewis, and I'm here to interview Miss Carlotta Monningh. So, if you would please introduce yourself and what your field is.
Carlotta Monningh, real estate agent, and many things in the past, but currently real estate agent.
All right. And how long were you in the field?
Uh, 15 years.
Excellent. So, the idea of this is to introduce individuals into figuring out whether or not they want to get into this field. So, what do you think some of the things someone should be asking themselves before they get into this field?
First of all, if they can live on other people's time schedules and not necessarily their own.
Mm.
I've seen agents that go in, they said, oh, they came into real estate because they wanted to work 9 to 5 to do their own hours. And I'm sorry, you work when everybody else is playing. You work Sundays, you work holidays, you work because if somebody is wanting to look at houses, they're not necessarily going to want to look on your time schedule. They want to look on their time schedule. And it is so it's really helpful to be flexible and you got to like people.
So, that's one of the prerequisites.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other prerequisites for the field?
Um, it takes a certain amount of school knowledge, what I would call school, like you have to be okay with figures because when you're writing a contract or you're telling somebody how much they're going to get for the sale of their house or how much uh, you have a loan officer who gives you the hard and fast figures, but you have to give them at least an idea of what they're getting into.
Mhm.
And so that would be a requirement. Liking people, being flexible. That's those are the main things to me.
All right. What type of training does the real estate field require?
You have to go to a real estate school, and that is generally 3 weeks of fairly intensive classroom type stuff,
Mhm.
you know, and you've got to know the real estate laws so that you don't go out and get yourself sued, and which is very easy to do if you're not careful. And then there's continuing education. You have to have, I believe it's 38 hours now, every 3 years of continuing education.
Hmm. So, this training for real estate school and the continuing education, is that done through real estate companies or is there a particular
It's
agency that
both.
does it?
Some companies run their own school,
Mm.
uh, but normally the multiple listing service will provide that, and
Mm.
you can go to wherever they are in uh, National Association of Realtors will come down and they will have whole classes at different locations, but at the different locations are always a real estate office of some kind. So it's always it's always real estate related, Kevin. You don't go out and go to Joe Blow's dining room to hold a class.
Mhm.
Although we have done some of that too.
Not too often, though.
No.
So, how did you find this first class when you first started going?
I had done customer service for International Harvester and loved it. This was up in Illinois, and we moved to Georgia, and they didn't have the same setup here, and they had a union, and I couldn't get in. So
Mm.
I was looking for something to do, and a friend of mine was a church friend of mine owned her own company, a real estate company, and she said, "Oh, Carlotta, you should be a real estate agent." And I said, "Oh, sure." I had not even thought about that. And she said, "Well, why don't you take the classes and see what you think?" So I took the classes, didn't tell anyone that I was going to take them because I thought if I failed this, I don't want anybody to know. And I hadn't been in that kind of a class setting for many years, and I wasn't sure how I was going to do it all.
All right.
But again, At that point in time, real estate was very much a or people oriented group, and it was constant. And even within in the group itself, you were told to network, 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 to get to know the other agents, to get to, be friends with them, or if you're not friends with them, at least to know how they are professionally, so that when you get to a closing table, you've got you're sort of, there's a camaraderie there that you're both wanting to get the particular uh, thing to close it. That's the object, and get through the closing and everybody's happy. That's the object. Doesn't always work that way, but that's the object.
Mm,
And a lot of it has to do with your rapport with the people involved.
that makes sense. Would you say this field is for anyone, or is there like a certain particular? I mean, aside from people who are people,
You know,
would you say there's like a particular demeanor or something else that maybe would qualify someone to be more for or better for this job than others?
um, you can't be you. As I said, you've got to be flexible. And if you're looking for 9 to 5, it's not going to be for you, because that's not the way it works.
Mm,
um, One gal said, "Oh, I want to be home at 3 o'clock when my kids get home from school." Well, that's fine if you can arrange it, but you can't do that every day. You know, uh, and not be a success at it. You can do it, but you're just playing games at that point.
right. So this is kind of an all-in field.
Exactly, exactly. It's you live, eat, drink real estate.
So no dipping your toes in it.
Exactly. There's no, and if you dip your toe in, you're going to pull it out and go someplace else.
What is the method to success aside from like tenacity and having to be in this like wholeheartedly?
I go back to being a people person,
Mhm.
being comfortable with people. Uh, they may have different values than you. They may have different uh, goals than you do. But when you get with them, your goal is to either sell their house or get them into a house, and that's the narrow thing. I mean, other things are peripheral, and those can be, you know, if you go to the same church, that's wonderful. If you belong to the same clubs, that's a plus, and that's where a lot of your people will come from,
Mhm.
is from the organizations that you're part of. But if you're sitting in the office and somebody comes in and wants an agent, they want somebody that can show them houses that they are looking for, and not what the agent necessarily wants to sell. I remember when I bought a house here in Georgia, uh, the agent said to us in the car as he was showing us houses, he said, "I haven't shown you the houses that our office has, other agents have available from our office." And I said, "Are they ones that we want to look at?" "Well, no, but I should show them anyway." And at that point, I'm sorry, that's not what we're here for.
Right.
I don't want to look at houses that I don't want to see. So you've got to know your people and know what it is. Listen to them. That I would put that in capital letters. Listen to them, and listen to what they don't say also.
Mm. And how would you certain like determine that? How could one discern that?
Um, okay, if they're talking, okay, this is putting it down into pretty much words of one syllable, real estate. If they are if they're talking about that they want 3 bedroom, 2 bath house, 2 stories. We want all the bedrooms upstairs. And you listen to them and say, "Okay, uh, how flexible are you? And what if the master bedroom's on the main floor? Oh yes, I want the master bedroom on the main floor, but you just said you wanted all the bedrooms upstairs. Well, not the master bedroom. So you've got to listen to, we want to be within walking distance of town. I'm sorry, there's nothing available within walking distance of town. Um, how far are you willing to drive? You know, well, my wife doesn't drive. Okay, then are you, what, how do you plan on getting around this? And get them to talk about it. And as they talk about it, they will say, okay, well, her cousin Irma lives down the street a few blocks. She can pick her up. So you've just changed the whole scenario.
Oh,
So you've got to listen to what they're not saying and pull it out of
okay. You got to dig
them.
for some of the
Yeah,
information you want. Why would other people want to get into this field, do you think?
because there is flexibility.
Mhm.
You aren't tied to a 9 to 5 schedule. You can pretty much set your own schedule as to how successful you want to be. A lot of people do real estate part time, but when they do real estate part time, uh, it's just that it's a part time job, and it's not a career. I personally don't care for part time agents. I know that they have a function, but they are also not as committed as because, as I said earlier, real estate is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And a part-time agent can't do that. They'll do a little bit and they'll putz around with it, but they're not as committed as a real estate agent should be.
Would you say a part-time agent may not also give as much to the field or the others in that
Exactly.
office?
Exactly.
And is that just because of the amount of time that they're able to spend on projects?
Yeah. And they also, well, the emphasis has changed since I got into it, into the where they used to say network, 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 and getting to know the other agents. Part-time agent can't do that. You know, they can get to know the other agents in their office, but get they can't go to open houses. They can't do a lot of the things that full-time agents do
Mhm.
and get to know other agents from other companies.
So what would be your best advice for someone trying to get into the field?
Well, I mean, you can always do the way that most people do, and that is to go to a company and have them refer you to a school and you sign up for the school,
Okay.
you know, and that's one way. But if it were me, I think I would ask if there is an agent there that I could shadow.
Okay.
And I mean, you can't do anything and you've got to be able to keep your mouth shut, you know, but shadow them for a few days or a couple of weeks or something and see if that's what you really want to do.
Mhm. Okay. So that would be kind of like a little, not necessarily OJT because you wouldn't be getting paid for that time, but
Correct.
so that would just be more on the side of interning
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, yes, it would be sort of that, yeah.
All right. What would you expect when you're shadowing people?
If
Like how would
you
that work?
if you were the one that was doing the shadowing,
Yes.
I would expect to see everything straight through from when they do write a listing agreement, to when they go to the closing table.
Mm.
Or if they've got people that they're showing houses to, I would go along and kind of hang in the background and just watch what the agent does and how to show a house because there's a a knack to showing a house. I mean, you don't just open the door and say, go take a look. You walk through and say, oh, did you notice this over here? And you've got to go in this back room back here. There's a room back here. You may not have seen that. And just make sure that they see the whole house.
Right.
So that would, and so to shadow somebody, you would just follow the agent and stay in the background.
And pick up those things. Now you were talking about the listing. What is that?
The listing is where somebody wants to sell their house
Okay.
and they call you and you go out and you go through, you look at the house and you do your comps, which is looking to see what other houses in the subdivision have sold for. And you do kind of a plus and minus. The house across the street sold for this amount. but it has a pool. The one you're at does not have. So if it's sold for 500,000, you can probably drop at least $500, and just more than that, $5,000 for the pool, and uh, one house has a basement, another house does not. So and you do all that to come to what you think the house will sell
Okay.
for. And then you talk to them and they sign a contract and you put it on the market.
What are places people can find opportunities within real estate? I mean, being able to maybe move to, or like some of the different positions that are in the real estate field.
There's not there's not that many. Some people go form their own, what I call them a quasi company, but they form their own group within the company that they're with, and somebody in that group may take over and they'll do all the input for all the agents. Um, and if you do that, then the person that's in charge of that group has to make sure that all of the agents that are under her care that signed up to be part of her group uh, get what they need to do their job. It's like a big mentoring service,
Okay.
for lack of a better word. Uh, that I was never part of a group because that's not my thing, you know. But I know lots of agents who have been, and it's a really not a bad way to start out because you've got somebody that's feeding you people, feeding you uh, somebody where you can go out on a listing appointment that they want, or feeding you clients that you can show property to, and you're not having to dig up your own people.
So at the start of the career, what should new real estate agents perhaps focus on? Or what are some of the things that you think would be the kind of foundations for a good real estate career?
That's a good question. Um, I keep going back to people. You know, you've got to be comfortable with people, and with people you don't know, and with people that are different from you. Uh, and you've got to stay focused on the fact that you're not there to solve their financial problems. You're not there to solve their relationship problems. You're there to sell them a house or sell their house, whichever it is. And so you've got to stay focused, which doesn't mean that you can't stop for lunch and everybody have a good time and this kind of thing. But you can't get involved with them personally. I don't think.
Mm.
You know, I mean, you might later on as you get a contract and the thing, you're looking at 60 to 90 days out before the contract actually closes. And during that time, you stay in touch and you talk to them. And so that narrows the the hands off thing. You do get involved with them personally. You can go with them and help them pick out wedding presents, or you can go with them and help them pick out baby stuff, or this kind of thing as you have time.
Mhm.
But that till it gets to that point, then you need to stay focused on what you can't get drug into their problems. And because you have a bond, it's easy to do. So you've got to stay in charge.
So you got to keep the relationship professional, business.
Exactly.
Okay. So what other kind of foundational things are good for helping oneself develop while starting off as a real estate agent?
You've got to have the money to fund all this while you're not having where there's no income.
Mhm.
I remember one gal walked into the office one day and she said that she wanted to become a real estate agent, and the gal that was at the desk said, "And why is this?" And she says, "Because of all the money." And I said to her, I said, "Can you live for at least 90 days without a paycheck?" Because if you go out and get a listing and sell it immediately, you're looking at 90 days before it goes to closing before you have a paycheck.
Mm.
And she was shocked. I don't know what her expectation was, but it certainly wasn't that.
Hmm. Probably more like the car sales style
Exactly.
rate of pay. Like you make a sale today, it goes through, then a
Yep.
week or two later, you get your paycheck for that sale.
Yep.
Okay, so it takes 90 days perhaps
Yeah.
for a sale.
It can take longer,
Wow.
but it does take 90 days. You got to get them with the loan officer. You work with the loan officer, and you should do this before you ever take them out. But the loan officer determines whether or not they can even buy a house, whether they've got the income or the background. The loan officer qualifies them. You go out, you find your house that you want to buy, and then he goes back and although he has submitted, I say he, it could be a she, but they have submitted all your pre-paperwork to their company to see, yes, we will loan them the money or no, we won't, what have you.
Mhm.
Then he comes in and he goes more in depth. And that's when the client is bringing in uh, bank stubs, credit card, all of their bills, everything that they have financially,
Mhm.
and then into him, and then he creates a portfolio and it goes off to get approved. Once it gets approved, then he comes back and yes, we can go to closing. But this does not happen overnight. You know, the only part of this that happens overnight is a cash closing, and you can do that in 2 weeks,
Okay.
generally speaking. You know, but you don't see too terribly many of those. Um, and then, of course, then you have to schedule the closing, and you have to pick a time it's when it's convenient with everybody except for the agents. You have to have the buyer there and you have to have the seller there. If the seller works and cannot possibly get time off to go to a closing, then you've got to find out whether or not he can come on and whether the attorney will see him of an evening. There's there's all kinds of things that you run into that can change the time frame on this.
Hmm. Interesting. So when you say cash offer, is it someone walking up with a briefcase full of money?
Pretty close. Because they have to have something from the bank saying that they have funds at the bank or at a credit union, 250,000 for this house. Yes, I've got 250,000 in this account. And then the bank issues a statement saying that, or the credit union or whatever. And then
Okay.
that goes to closing.
We're looking at moving the money from that cash office or cash transfer. That's then you're talking about it just goes one person's bank to the other person's bank via the lawyers.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Unless they do have that briefcase full of money.
I have to tell you, I don't think there would be many attorneys that would allow you to do that because they don't want that money sitting in their office.
Right. What are the positives of someone working as a real estate agent?
Oh, well, again, as I said, the ability to control to some, it's really funny. I sit here and I say, okay, you're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And yet at the same time, you can control your hours.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't say, well, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. You can't say, I need to be home at 3 o'clock every day when my kid gets home from school. And then I can't do anything after that. That's very difficult
Mm.
for a real estate agent. But if you have a doctor's appointment, you know, there's no problem. I can show houses in the morning. I've got a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, so I'm not going to schedule anything for that afternoon. I'll see him tomorrow, kind of thing.
Okay.
So you've got a lot more flexibility with your time within strange kind of parameters.
because it's basically based on when the customer needs to be shown the house or when the lawyers are going to be available
Yeah.
or
I mean,
whoever else.
you're self-employed, basically. I mean,
Mhm.
your license is held by a real estate company, but you're basically considered to be self-employed.
Okay.
So your company can say to you, okay, I want you to be available, from 9 to 5 every day. And they can say that. And if you say, I don't want to do that, they can say, go find another company. They can set up parameters, but that doesn't generally happen.
Mm.
It can happen, but it doesn't generally happen. Generally speaking, if you sign up with a company, you're pretty much on your own within the parameters of what the company requires. Some companies will say, okay, you've got to have X amount of closings per year, you know. And if you come to the end of the year and you don't have X amount of closings, they can at that point say, okay, you're not a fit here, go someplace else.
Yeah.
You know,
How often do those, or how quickly can those transfers or firings happen, or terminations, whichever it's called?
terminations. Yeah. Uh, how quickly? Uh, they hand you your pocket card. Uh, they hand you your pocket card from their office. They contact uh, the Georgia Real Estate Commission, and you're gone.
And what's the pocket card?
The pocket card is the card that you have that says that you're a real estate agent.
Ah, so they just pull it out of the file and says, "Okay, you're
Yeah,
done."
usually off the wall.
Okay.
But and they will say, we've sent your license back to the real estate company,
Mm,
or real estate, Georgia Real Estate Agents
okay,
Commission. That's the word I'm looking at. Georgia Real Estate Commission.
gotcha. And so state to state real estate is different because do you have to be licensed in each state, or how does that work? Do you know?
Uh, I can sell in Georgia. I can sell in Alabama. I can sell in there's areas around where your license is that you can sell,
Okay.
but it depends on the state. The state may say, not unless you're licensed in Georgia or in Alabama,
Mm,
or whatever. And they can make requirements. Alabama can make requirements that Georgia does
mm,
for you to have a license there. But they're usually pretty flexible.
okay, which would be nice,
Yeah.
especially since the job is such a one where you have to be flexible.
I would I would hesitate to sell a house in Alabama. I would sooner refer it out to an agent in Alabama and get paid a referral fee, because I don't know the streets there. I don't know the housing areas there. I don't know, and you need to be very familiar with the area that you're selling in.
Mm,
I mean, right now, I could absolutely sell a house in North Georgia. Do I know anything about the communities in North Georgia at the real estate community? What's on for sale, and I can pull some of it up online, but that's not the same thing. you know you need to have a familiarity that if I'm going to sell a house in Roswell, do I even know how to get to Roswell? I mean, most people would, but still, you get my point.
right.
It's in Sandy Dunes subdivision. Do I know anything about that subdivision? Is that a good subdivision? Is it going downhill? Are people selling their homes in there because of something that I don't know what's going on?
Mm,
You know, so most agents stay within their little niche area.
which kind of makes sense.
It makes them better agents too, I think.
And then it also makes it a little easier for them, would you say, to kind of find that place where the customer is comfortable with or what
Yes,
they're looking for?
exactly. And well, that's totally the other thing. Um, these people may have seen a house up there in Roswell, and they want to know how the schools are there. I can pull up the report, but that doesn't tell you, you know, everything that you need to know. Yes, the schools are good. Does that mean if I send my daughter there, will she be bullied? I don't know. You know, and like here in Henry County, I'm familiar with the schools. I know what goes on because I see it in the papers and I see it, I know what, and I talk to people who have kids in school. And so I have a good idea of what's going on or not going on in the schools. And I'm not talking about academically. I'm talking about peer pressure and that there are kids going to get bullied because their dad doesn't make 200,000 a year or something along this line.
Mhm. Within the field of real estate agency, what are some of the negative things that an agent might come across? What are some of the harder parts of the job or harder parts of the culture?
Well, I will tell you, and I don't know how all this will go. You may want to edit this out, but I carry a gun.
Mm,
And if I'm showing houses and the house is a foreclosure or whatever, if I'm going in that house, that gun is going with me because I don't know what I'm walking into. I've only ever pulled my gun out one time, and that's because these people were looking for foreclosures to flip. And we pulled up in front of this house, and the house was littered with cans and bottles, and
mhm,
the yard was littered with that, and the door was standing open. And I thought, uh, and if you get that feeling at that point, either leave or be prepared for what you might find. And I literally walked in that house with that gun in my hand because as it happened, somebody has been living there, but they weren't there, you know.
okay.
But I didn't know that, you know.
I couldn't have known.
Yeah.
So was this your first time on the property ever?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. Usually when you're showing homes, it will be your first time on the property,
mm,
and so you don't ever know what you're walking into. I walked into one house. This goes back years ago, but I walked into one house. House was on a basement. We went down in the basement, and the house actually people were living there, but they weren't there. But we went down into the basement, and I opened a closet door, and it was filled with satanic stuff. And the people that we were with said, "Let's go," because I mean,
were these the potential customers?
yeah,
Like, we don't want to go somewhere where there's like a shrine to Satan.
exactly. And so and you never know. I mean, that I can probably remember every weird thing I've run into because there's been so few, you know, but you just never know.
Mm,
And you just need to be prepared and you can't be scared,
right.
you know.
So what about with other customers, like the customer relationship? What should a real estate agent be prepared for, be used to, aside from just a rapport with them?
Uh, that's about it. You probably wouldn't hurt to know if they have like allergies, pet allergies, because you don't want to take them into a house that has five cats and find out that they're highly allergic to cats, even though the house is vacant. I mean, not vacant, but no one's
Currently
presently
living
there,
there.
currently there. And if you're showing houses all day, you probably need to know things like, okay, are they vegetarian? Because you don't want to go to Burger King if they're vegetarian. So this, just common sense things that uh, guide you in dealing with them,
Mhm.
and big on common sense. There's so little of it.
There's a saying, common sense is not a common virtue.
Right, right.
I do understand that. Where do you see this industry going in the near future or distant future?
I'm
Because,
sorry to say it, but it's going more and more to AI.
oh,
I mean, it has gone from when I came in to real estate to now. It has become less and less personalized. People are going online and pulling up houses.
Mhm.
You don't get very many people who are moving from A to B in the same community, this kind of thing. So they don't know what they're looking for. I mean, they know the house they're looking for. If they're in Locust Grove, they're not going to want to look at a house in Ellenwood, you know, probably, you know.
Okay.
And so they need, and but they see two houses. Oh, both of either one of these would work for us. They're wonderful, but they don't know. They don't know what they don't know,
Mhm.
you know. And you can't, you can't. They need to stay off the daggone computer. Once they need a real estate agent, and once they hire, well, the buyer doesn't actually hire a real estate agent, although if they're not careful, they can wind up having to pay the buyer.
Mm.
Now, not when I first got in, but now they can. Uh, but it's more and more it's going to AI. You know, uh, the straw that broke the camel's back for me was a class I attended to teach me how to use Chat GPT to write the descriptions for my houses that I'm listing. If I can't do that on my own, I don't need to be in real estate.
Mm.
If I can't look at a house and write a description that will make somebody want to come see it, then I need to find another job. Yeah.
So if AI does end up being more pervasive in the field, what do you think an agent should be prepared for? What kind of role do you think or how do you think that would change the look of the real estate agent?
Totally. Totally. It takes it, as I have said over and over again about what a people person real estate is,
Mhm.
takes that out of that totally.
Wow.
All you are there is an automobile on wheels and the ability to sign a contract.
Hmm.
You know, they're not looking for your input at all. In fact, they don't want it. They think, as I said, they don't know what they don't know. And they think that I see some of it now, that 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 they know everything they need to know, that the only reason they need a real estate agent is to write the contract because they can't legally do it themselves. It spoils the profession, and it is a profession. It takes the agent who can sit there and know that these people are making a mistake, you know, but they're not going to listen because they think they know everything.
Hmm.
You know, they think they don't need this person sitting there except to, you know, write the contract. This is the house we want. And you may have a wealth of knowledge about the area that they don't have. You know, they're looking at four walls and roof. And a home is much more than that.
So speaking of people like customers dealing with the customers and them thinking they know everything, what are some of the things you've had to correct a customer about or perhaps steer them toward or away from?
My biggest thing, and I joke about this, but it's fairly serious, are first time home buyers who want what their mom and dad have after 40 years. It's, I mean, they don't look back to where their mom and dad started.
Mhm.
Their mom and dad is in this $400,000 house. And, but when they started out, they were in this $250 a month apartment, kind of thing. And, uh, and they don't recognize that if they have two incomes and the loan officer says, well, based on your two incomes, you can buy this much house. You can buy this $300,000 house based on your two incomes. Well, what happens if somebody loses a job and it's a young couple? What happens if a baby comes along? You know, they need an agent that can say to them, what happens if you lose a job? And because the loan officer won't. The loan officer is basically cut and dry. He or she deals with figures pretty much. I mean, they have a rapport with people, but their object is to whether or not they can on paper qualify for this loan, and they don't necessarily think about life changes. You what happens if one of them dies? You know, what then? And then they say, okay, well, you can sell the house. Well, maybe, maybe not. I mean, you might be able to sell it, but can you get out of it what you owe on it, plus all the real estate costs and moving and all of this bit while you're grieving over your loss?
Mm.
I mean, that's why I say real estate is such a people person. You've got to you've got to have a heart for your client, even if they don't want you to. I'd rather have somebody not buy a house from me because I pointed out some facts to them that they didn't necessarily want to look at. They wanted more than they could afford, or, you know, you've got a $5,000 a month mortgage on this house. Can you do that? You know, uh, and again, going back to what happens to this house if something happens to one of the incomes, they don't want to hear that,
Mm.
but they need to hear it. And sometimes that's where the real estate agent comes in.
Mm. We've spoken before about garages. Would you like to would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes. I can't tell you the number of young people I've said that, they've got this bright, shiny new car, and they said, oh, we have to have a garage to put our car in. And I show them houses they can afford. And not all of them have garage. No, we have to have a garage to put our car in. And so they find a house with a garage, which is maybe not the house that they would have bought if they weren't so fixated on the garage. And you go over there a year later, the car is setting out in the driveway, and the garage is floor to ceiling with junk.
People and their stuff.
Exactly.
Either that or the boxes for everything that they have inside of the house.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, I said to one couple one time, I said, why don't you go out and get a, storage unit
Mm,
that you can put the stuff in and give you your garage back? And they said, oh, well, we can't afford that. You know, you make your choices.
yeah. What about the work culture for a real estate agent, like dealing with other agents or perhaps other lenders, or you mentioned attorneys?
That has that has changed drastically in the years that I've been in real estate. Um, Used to be there was every Wednesday there was an open house someplace, and sometimes two or three. But you would go there, and that's where, and it was for agents, not for clients. It was for agents,
Mm,
and to preview the house, so that if they have a buyer, they've already seen this. I've sold several houses because I saw them on a Wednesday at the open house. You go, you have lunch, you tour the house, and then I would go out, and then somebody would come along, and they would say, "I want a house that has this, 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 and this," and I would say, you know, in the back of my mind, I just saw a house exactly like what you're looking for. Would take them out there, and because of that,
mm,
and because I went to the open house, because I know the realtor, everything goes so much smoother. You know, it's not an adversarial thing. It's not, well, you came in with a lower offer than what we've got it listed for. Hey, counter back, you know, and see if we can find a meeting place.
okay.
And but they don't do that anymore. There's rarely ever an open house, and certainly not like the every Wednesday ones that they used to have, you know. Uh, and I the I had a closing last year. I had the seller and the buyers came to the closing table. No agent with them. Uh, First time home buyers. I don't think they'd ever been in an attorney's office before, least of all for closing on a house, you know. And the attorney said, "Is your agent not coming?" And they said, "Well, she said she'd meet us here." And about that time, the door opened. We were in the conference room. About that time, the door opened and she popped in and she says, "Oh, good, you found it. Okay, well, you're okay." And she turned around, walked out, and she didn't close the door. And I heard her say to the receptionist, "I'll be back later to pick up my check." And out the door she went.
Did the sale go through?
Oh, yeah, because I worked both sides of the table and the attorney was excellent,
Mhm.
you know, but not because of her age, and I felt so sorry for them because they were scared, you know? I mean, that's a I don't mean scared like, you know, "Oh my
The
god,"
first
kind of
time
thing,
jitters sort of
you
thing.
know? But they didn't know what to expect, you
Right.
know? And they didn't have anybody there holding their hand figuratively, you know? So, as I said, I worked both sides of the table. And that's not the first time that that's said. That's the first time I've ever heard the agent say, "I'll be back to pick up my check." But I've had several times where the agent has not come in with their clients. I don't understand that.
Mm.
I mean, you've been with them for however long to get them to this point. Why wouldn't you want to celebrate with them at the closing? I mean, you know,
Right.
I always take my clients to lunch or let's go get a cup of coffee and celebrate or something, you know, afterwards to make something to make it a little bit special, you know, and not this scary thing, you know.
Yeah. Kind of set their mood at ease, keep the friendly rapport that you've already built
Yeah.
up.
And say, you know, and I will say, okay, when you get to the house, if there's anything that you have a question on, call me.
Hmm.
That I you know, my service doesn't end when we leave that table. You know, that if there's a question, if you need a handyman, I've got a whole list of names. If you need to know where to go to have the water turned on, I can tell you, you know, this kind of thing.
Okay.
So you're a good agent looks at more than just the paycheck. But there's a lot of them that's why they got into the business.
How do you see their sales or their earnings or their maybe just their ability to perform repeat business compared to agents who are more traditional and more walk you through everything and more wholehearted into
I can't
the
answer
industry?
that actually. Because I watch agents that made a lot more money in real estate than I did that I wouldn't have for my real estate agent if you paid me, you
Mm.
know. And but they seem to somehow talk a good game, you know, and they have a pipeline
Mhm.
that they can get referrals from.
Hmm. So in their case, perhaps it's about the same kind of connections, but maybe just looser. Or is it maybe you think the type of customer pool that they're pulling from?
I think it's the customer pool that they're pulling from. I don't think they get that many referrals from from past clients.
Mhm.
They're pulling from new sources all the time, and that's hard.
Mm.
But they seem to make a success out of it. You know, they advertise a lot.
Mhm.
Uh, I talked to somebody just the other day, and uh, she was going to look for an agent. She doesn't live here; she lives elsewhere, and she says lives in another state. And she says, uh, "Well, I'm going to look at the person who sells the most homes." And I said, that's not necessarily the person you want.
Mm.
You know, you want to find somebody. I said, ask your friends who they've used. Ask your neighbors around you who they've used. Ask the people at your church who they've used. You need to get referrals from those sources because if they're happy, they'll be more than happy to tell you their name, their address, their phone number, and how many kids they have. If they're not happy, they will really be happy to tell you that you don't want so and so, kind of thing. And I said, so you can't go by the only thing that a person who sells high volume is is that they can uh they can access a streamline of things. That doesn't mean they're good agents or that they're caring agents, I guess I should say, not good agents. They may be very good agents at paperwork and all this bit, but do they care what happens to you? Or are you just somebody will get you in this house, I'll do the paperwork, I'm on to the next client.
Right.
And if they've got a lot of listings, do they have time for you?
What are some of the hardships of the career, like of the field dealing with I, either customers or other anyone else, or the process?
Well, the process can get to be a real headache.
Okay. How so?
Oh, just the paperwork involved,
Mm.
because most agents that are good agents are people oriented and not necessarily paper oriented, and they don't want to. You have to remember that, oh, I've got to get this document signed, and oh, gee, I didn't get that document signed. I can remember going out at 11 o'clock at night one time to get a piece of paper signed
Wow.
because I had forgotten to get it signed earlier. You learn real quick that way.
I'd imagine so.
But that would be, I think, probably for at least for me, that was the biggest thing was making sure I had all my I's dotted, my T's crossed. Um, I think, well, going back to the gal that wanted to be home at 3 o'clock every day, you've got to be you you've got to be single minded on on in real estate. You've got to if you're going to be a good real estate agent, I think you have to be single minded for your client, and it's for this client. It's not for the 12 that are waiting over here or what have you. When you're with them, you're with them. So if you're with them and you're on your phone because you're talking to all these other people or whatever, if you're talking to something that has to do with them, that's another story. But if you're talking to other agents or talking to your friend Sarah across the street or your friend whatever, you're missing it. So they have to be when you're with them, they have to be the most important people in your life.
Mm. What are some of the other challenges of being in the real estate business?
I would say that just the biggest one is the fact that there's a standing joke about oh, in fact I said it just the other day. I was talking to an agent and I said I didn't call you on the weekend because uh, I figured you wanted some time to your own. And she said, you mean you actually think I have a life? And I know better. But I figured she didn't need me adding to it because I just had a question. But that is probably the biggest thing that that you've got. It's hard to maintain a regular life because you plan on having people over for dinner and you get a call from somebody that you've been showing houses to for the last 6 months,
Mhm.
and they say, we found it, we found the one we want, we want you to come show it to us right now. Hey, You've been working with them for 6 months trying to find something that they like, you know, and they want to see this house and it's going to be it. You've got people coming for dinner. What do? If you're married, you turn them over to your spouse and hope that he or she can get it all together, you know. Uh, if you're not married, you call the people that are coming over and say, "Can we reschedule? You know, I've got to go out and do work." You don't have a life. I mean, you've got to you do, but you've got to carve it out. You know, it's not like other occupations where you get up in the morning, you go to work, you come home, and
Those traditional jobs where it's just a
yeah,
9 to 5, like that
right,
one lady was saying she wanted.
yeah, right, exactly.
All right. Well, I do appreciate you taking time for this interview. Do you have any closing thoughts or things that you think someone might want to know or that I missed?
I would think if somebody wanted to get into real estate, um, if they can do it, I would strongly suggest trying to shadow another agent. And that depends on the company, whether the company will allow it and all, you know. Uh, but if they can't, at least they can sit down and talk to an agent and say, okay, what happens here? What happens when this happens? How do you handle this? You know, and not just jump in cold. I mean, because they'll send you to a school where you learn all of the paper stuff, you know, but that's only the beginning. In fact, I would bet you any agent you talk to will say, I don't even remember what we covered in that school, because they teach you how to be a paper agent, you know. They don't teach you the feelings. They don't teach you the emotions. They don't teach you the things that you really need to know to be a good agent.
Mhm. Mm. All right.
That's it.
That's it. Well, Ms. Monning, thank you so much for your time. Real estate agent Carlotta Monning. Thanks again.